When he saw me, he collapsed into my arms like the little boy he once was, crying as he hadn't in decades. "Mom, I'm so sorry for everything," he sobbed into my shoulder. "I was a terrible son. I let her treat you badly. I let us drift apart. And now it might be too late to fix it." I held my son as I had when he was 5 and skinned his knee falling off his bike. "It's not too late," I whispered, stroking his now gray hair. "It's never too late for love, my son. Never." In the days that followed, I established a routine that gave me purpose again. Every morning I went to the hospital. I brought fresh flowers from my garden, changed the water in the vase beside Anna's bed, wiped away the wilting leaves. I brought books and read aloud, novels, poems, chronicles, anything to reach the consciousness that lay hidden deep within. I cared for the grandchildren while Mark worked and spent afternoons by Anna's side. Sophie and Paul, terrified by their mother's condition, clung to me like shipwrecked children seeking safe harbor. I cooked for them, helped with homework, sang the lullabies I once sang to Mark. They slept in my bed, one on each side, and I lay awake through the night, listening to their soft breaths and thanking God I could be of use once more. The nurses began to recognize me, greeting me with smiles. "Mrs. Helen," they'd say, "you're an angel. We don't see many mothers-in-law do what you do." I didn't feel like an angel. I felt like a mother doing what any mother would, protecting her family, even after it had hurt her deeply. It was one afternoon in April, as the spring leaves began to green, that the miracle occurred. I was reading Anna, a story by Clarice Lispector, a tale of a woman rediscovering love through pain, when a single tear rolled down her cheek. One tear carrying all the missing words, the missing apologies, the missing bridges. "Anna," I whispered, taking her hand for the first time since we'd met. "You hear me, don't you? You're coming back to us." In the weeks that followed, I cherished every small sign of recovery as though I were watching a slow-motion miracle. The faintest finger twitch, the steadier breathing when I spoke, the subtle shift in her vital signs the moment I entered the room. Doctors said cases like hers were unpredictable. Some patients woke in days, others took months, and some never awoke. But I had an unshakable conviction that Anna would return. Maybe because we had one last conversation to have. Maybe because fate still had lessons left for our fractured family. When she finally opened her eyes on a sunny morning in May, I was there. I had stayed overnight because Mark was down with the flu and couldn't leave the children. I was reading from a recipe book, my mother's handwritten heirloom, stained with decades of love, when I heard a faint, raspy voice. "Helen," she whispered. I looked up from the book, and there she was, gazing back at me with an expression I had never seen. No coldness, no distance, no contempt. Instead, there was gratitude, and perhaps the first stirrings of a respect we had both lacked. "Hello, my daughter," I said, using words I had never spoken to her before. "Welcome back." Anna tried to speak, but her voice was hoarse from silence. I brought her a glass of water with a straw and helped her drink, just as I had countless times before for Mark when he was sick. Tears welled in her eyes, tears not of pain, but of something far deeper. "I've heard," she finally whispered. "I've heard everything, the stories, the songs, the recipes. You were here every day, weren't you?" I nodded, unable to speak. Words stuck between relief and emotion. "Why?" she asked. And in that simple question lay the complexity of our entire relationship, the years of hurt and misunderstanding. "Because you're family," I replied softly. "And family never abandons family, no matter what." Then she gripped my hand, really gripped it, like someone clinging to a lifeline in a stormy sea. "Forgive me," she murmured as tears flowed freely. "Please forgive me for everything. I was terrible to you. I was afraid." "Afraid of what, my daughter?" I asked. "Afraid that Mark loved you more than me. Afraid you were a better mother than I could ever be. Afraid the grandchildren would choose you over me. I projected my insecurity onto you and made you an enemy when you only wanted to be my friend." I squeezed her hand, feeling decades of tension dissolve like salt in water. "There's nothing to forgive," I said, and I meant it. A mother's love is different from a wife's love. They don't compete, they complement each other. I never wanted to take your place, Anna. I only wanted a place of my own. In that moment, something extraordinary happened. For the first time since we'd met, Anna and I truly saw one another, not as rivals, not as obstacles, but as two women who loved the same people and had squandered precious years on a war that never needed to be fought. Anna's recovery was slow but steady. I continued my daily visits, not out of duty, but out of genuine desire. We talked about everything: Mark as a boy, the grandchildren's antics, family recipes, dreams, and fears. I learned she had lost her mother young and never had a maternal figure in her adult life. At last, I understood the root of her insecurity, her need for control, her fear of sharing her husband's love. When she was finally discharged 2 months later, we walked together to pick up the grandchildren from school. Sophie and Paul ran to us, hugging mother and grandmother in a way that seemed to restore the world to its proper place. As I watched them laugh while holding our hands, I realized we had reclaimed something far greater than forgiveness. We had reclaimed our family's future. Our first dinner after Anna's return brimmed with symbolism. Mark set the table with special care, placing fresh flowers and bringing out the best china. When it was time to sit, he paused and looked at me with teary eyes. "Mom," he said, "your place is here," and he led me to the head of the table chair. My place at life's feast. But Anna rose and took my other hand. "No," she said gently. "Helen's place is here beside me. The head chair can remain empty today. It's time to start a new tradition." We sat side by side, two women who had learned that love doesn't diminish when shared, but multiplies. During dinner, Anna asked me to teach her the turkey recipe Mark loved so much. I promised we would cook together next weekend, and that I would tell her all the stories behind each secret spice. The following months were filled with rebuilding and discovery. Anna began visiting my home on weekends, not as an obligation, but as someone who genuinely wanted to be there. She helped in the garden, learned to crochet with me, and listened patiently to the stories of my youth I had long kept tucked away. Together we forged new family traditions. Sunday afternoons became sacred. I taught Anna and the grandchildren old recipes, while Mark watched with a smile I hadn't seen in years. The house again resonated with laughter, happy voices, and the aroma of good food baking in the oven. The deepest transformation, however, happened within me. I rediscovered that my importance in the family was never threatened. It had merely changed form. I was no longer the controlling matriarch who had to hold everything together, but the wise counselor who knew when to speak and when to listen, when to lead and when to step back. Anna became not just a daughter-in-law but a true daughter, a daughter I didn't birth, but chose to love, and who chose to love me in return. She gifted me something I had never had, a female companion in the family, someone with whom I could share the secrets, worries, and joys only women truly understand. Today, when I look at our dining table on Sundays, I see more than a gathered family. I see proof that forgiveness is a transforming power, that true love always finds a way, and that sometimes we must lose everything to discover what truly matters. The head of the table chair is still mine, but now it is no longer a place of isolation. It is the seat from which I can watch my entire family, observe my grandchildren's growth, and witness the love between my son and daughter-in-law. It is the place of the one who laid the house's foundations, and now knows its walls are secure. Sophie, now 8, sometimes laps up in my lap as we tell Paul stories. She always asks about the time when Mom and I weren't friends, and I explain that people sometimes must lose themselves to find themselves, that we sometimes must go through darkness to appreciate the light. Anna, for her part, has become my greatest defender. If anyone makes a disrespectful remark about mothers-in-law or the elderly, she rises like a lioness protecting her cubs. "Helen isn't just my mother-in-law," she says proudly. "She's the strongest woman I know, and I'm lucky to have her in my life." Mark has grown too. He learned that being a man doesn't mean choosing between mother and wife, but having the courage to ensure both have their rightful place in his heart and life. He became more present, attentive, and grateful for the two women who shaped his life in different but complementary ways. Sometimes, in the quiet nights when everyone has left and I am alone in my house, I think of that terrible Christmas Eve that nearly tore our family apart. I think of the woman I was then, hurt, humiliated, lost, and of the woman I have become, wiser, stronger, aware of my own worth. I learned that dignity is not something others can take from us. It is something we carry within us, like a flame that may be momentarily smothered but never fully extinguished. I learned that true love doesn't demand sides but builds bridges. I learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting what was done to us, but choosing not to let it define who we are. The story of the woman humiliated at the table but who responded with compassion spread beyond our family. Neighbors spoke of it. Friends found inspiration in it. People who had endured similar situations sought me out for advice. I don't know if I'm wise enough to counsel others, but I share what I've learned, that love always triumphs over pride, patience is more powerful than anger, and that sometimes our greatest enemy is our greatest opportunity for growth. Today, as I write these words, I can hear my grandchildren's voices playing in the garden, smell the midday meal Anna is preparing in the kitchen, and see Mark repairing the garden gate with the same care David once showed. My house has become a home again, my table a place of gathering, my head of the table chair a throne of love. And when I sit there on Sundays, surrounded by the family I nearly lost and reclaimed with patience and love, I understand that this is the sweetest victory anyone can have, not victory over others, but victory over our own limitations, fears, and pettiness. The head of the table chair is not just a place at the table, it is the place of one who learned to wait, to forgive, to love unconditionally. It is the place of the woman who refused to be diminished by circumstances and chose to grow through pain. And now, whenever I see an empty chair at any table, I remember that there is always room for more love, always space for greater understanding, always an opportunity to turn wounds into bridges and differences into discoveries. This is my story, the story of a woman who lost her place at the table and discovered that her true place was far greater than any chair could ever hold, the place in the hearts of those we love, the place in the memory of moments we created together, the place in the eternity of the loving gestures we offer without expecting anything in return. The head of the table chair remains mine, but now I know that what truly matters is not where we sit, but with whom we choose to share life's table. I stood there in the middle of the company's conference room, the company I had built from scratch, watching my own daughter publicly accuse me of being a failing mother, a selfish woman who chose work over family. Helen's words cut through me like razor blades, slicing every fiber of my being as the other board members watched in embarrassed silence. You want to know why our company is losing its family essence? Because the founder never knew what a real family meant, she said, pointing an accusatory finger at me. Her eyes shone with a rage I knew all too well, the same rage I had seen in the mirror 20 years ago when I discovered my husband had a second family. But this time, the anger came not from a stranger, but from the person I loved most in the world, and it hurt far more than any affair ever could. The murmurs in the room grew louder as Helen continued her poisonous speech, listing how I never attended school performances, missed important birthdays, how she grew up being raised by nannies while I played entrepreneur. Every word was a targeted shot at wounds I had thought healed. I felt my heart race and my hands begin to tremble unnoticed. It was as if 25 years of sacrifices were erased within minutes, 25 years of building an empire to leave as her legacy, 25 years of fighting alone to prove that a divorced woman could raise a daughter and still be professionally successful. And now Helen stood there, turning all those achievements against me as though they were weapons. Do you know what the most ironic thing is? Helen continued, her voice echoing through the glass-walled room overlooking the city I helped transform. She always said she did everything for me, but she never asked me what I really wanted. Tears blurred my vision, but I held my ground. I couldn't show weakness, not here, not in front of all these men who had been waiting for decades to question my leadership at the first misstep. I took a deep breath and locked eyes with my daughter, searching for the sweet girl who once wrapped me in hugs every night and called me my superhero. But all I saw was the coldness of a stranger who shared my DNA and my determination, and had turned both against me. The meeting broke amid general embarrassment. Helen stormed out and slammed the door behind her, leaving a laden silence. I remained alone, gazing at the city through the panoramic windows of the 40th floor. Every skyscraper reminded me of a victory, a conquered obstacle. But in that moment, everything seemed empty. How had we come to this? How had the girl I loved most in the world become the person who could hurt me the most? My thoughts drifted 25 years into the past, to when it all began. I was only 28 and had just discovered that Richard, my husband of 6 years, had maintained a second family for 4 years. Helen was only 3 at the time, a cheerful, intelligent child who still believed Daddy traveled so often for work. The discovery came via a misplaced phone call, a weeping woman on the other end claiming she was pregnant again and could no longer bear sharing the man she loved. When she realized she'd dialed the wrong number, or perhaps the right number but the wrong person, the silence that followed was deafening. Back then, I worked as marketing director for a small cosmetics company. I earned a decent salary, but not enough to support a home and a little daughter on my own. Richard was a lawyer, earning 3 times my income, and I was financially dependent on him for almost everything. When I confronted him about the second family, he did not deny it. He simply said, these things happen, and that he would leave neither family, that I could either accept the situation or walk away with nothing, since all assets were in his name. I remember Helen playing in the garden that afternoon, carefree and happy, while my world crumbled around me. But I couldn't break, not with a little daughter who depended on me. That night, after putting Helen to bed, I sat at the kitchen table, with pen and paper, and made a list of what I needed to start over. First, a home. Second, a better paying job. Third, someone to care for Helen while I worked. Fourth, a plan to never be financially dependent again. There, at 2 a.m., under the kitchen lamp's light, my iron resolve was born. I would become independent. I would build something of my own. I would prove that a divorced woman could provide a dignified life for her daughter. The divorce was brutal. Richard used his legal expertise and connections to try to leave me with nothing. He claimed I was an unfit mother who worked too much and neglected Helen. Ironically, the same accusations my daughter would level against me decades later. I kept the house only because my mother, who had died 2 years earlier, had left it to me specifically. Richard received everything else: cars, investments, the beach house, all of it. But I had Helen, and that was all that mattered. I secured a better position at a larger cosmetics firm, working directly with senior management. The salary was nearly twice my previous one, but the responsibilities came with it. I left home at 7 a.m. and often returned after 9 p.m. Helen stayed with Mrs. Constance, a wonderful lady who became like a second grandmother to her. Mrs. Constance took her to school, helped with homework, prepared her favorite meals. I came home exhausted but always made it a point to listen to Helen's stories, read her bedtime tale, and seal our love with a goodnight kiss. The early years were the hardest. Helen missed her father, though he was rarely present. She asked questions I didn't know how to answer. Why doesn't Daddy live here anymore? Why doesn't he pick me up from school like other dads? Did I do something wrong? Each question felt like a knife in my heart, because I knew she paid the price for adult choices. But I knew lies were not the way. So in words carefully chosen for a 4, 5, 6-year-old, I explained that adults sometimes make hard decisions, that the love between Daddy and Mommy had ended, but that my love for her would last forever. Gradually, Helen adapted to our new routine. She was a resilient, bright, determined child, traits I later realized she inherited from me. By the time she was 7, I had been promoted to marketing director. At 10, I became vice president. Each promotion brought more travel, more late meetings, but also greater financial security and more opportunities for Helen's future. When Helen turned 12, an opportunity arose that would change our lives forever. The company was in financial trouble, and the owners decided to sell. I had a revolutionary idea for the cosmetic market, natural, sustainable products, long before it became a trend. But implementing this idea in my current company would have been impossible. So I made the riskiest decision of my life. I invested all my savings, secured a loan against our home, and founded my own company. Helen didn't fully understand at the time but supported me with the surprising wisdom of a pre-adolescent. "Mom, you always succeed at everything you try. You'll do this too," she said, hugging me tightly on the day I signed the papers. And she was right. In the first 3 years, the company grew exponentially. We developed innovative products, formed strategic partnerships, captured significant market share. But this growth came at a price. I worked more, traveled more, and spent even longer hours away from home. By the time Helen entered high school, she began showing signs of resentment. She complained that I missed her school plays, didn't know her friends, and was always too busy for her. I tried to compensate with expensive gifts and vacations, anything money could buy. But what she wanted was time, presence, attention, things I had little to offer. We gradually drifted apart without me fully noticing, like a tiny crack in a wall growing, until the whole structure threatens to collapse. When Helen graduated, our company was already a market leader in natural products. I had achieved my dream of financial and professional independence, but at a high cost. Helen chose to study business at a university in another state, claiming she wanted to see the world beyond Mom's bubble. I supported her decision, thinking it would be good for her independence. I didn't realize she was running away from me. During her 4 years at university, our contact became sporadic, quick calls, formal messages, mandatory holiday visits. Helen graduated with honors, and I attended her ceremony, beaming with pride. She hugged me that day and said, "Thank you for all you gave me, Mom, for the opportunities you never had." At the time, I interpreted this as gratitude. Today, I know it also carried a subtle accusation for the opportunities I never provided. A mother present in the crowd, a united family, a normal childhood. After graduation, Helen decided to join my company. I was overjoyed. Finally, we would work together, reconnect, and build the legacy I had always dreamed of leaving her. But Helen made it clear from the start that she wanted to earn her place on merit, not because she was my daughter. She began as a junior analyst in the division furthest from the president's office. She worked diligently, earned respect from colleagues, and demonstrated exceptional skill. Yet she maintained a professional distance that hurt more than any open hostility. Over the next 5 years, Helen advanced through the corporate ranks on her merits: manager, director, vice president. And I watched her rise with a mix of pride and melancholy. Pride that she became the strong, independent woman I always wanted her to be. Melancholy that in doing so, I had lost my daughter. She treated me with the respect due a competent boss, but the intimacy and affection we shared when she was a child had disappeared completely.